ASEAN People Speak, Season 5. I'm Regine Jessica Abuel, your host for this podcast. For our sixth episode, we will delve into the alarming rise of cyber scam compounds across ASEAN, a growing crisis that represents a new form of human trafficking and forced labor. Joining us is a dedicated human rights and migrants' rights advocate who has worked extensively across Asia and beyond. She is currently part of the program team of the Migrant Forum in Asia, a regional network of grassroots organizations, trade unions, faith based groups, migrants, their families, and advocates across Asia and the Middle East working together to advance social justice for migrant workers and their families. She currently leads the regional campaign on sustainable and decent protection and has engaged in ASEAN platforms such as ASEAN Forum on Migrant Labor, ASEAN People's Forum, and various ASEAN declarations. Globally, she has participated in the Global Forum on Migration and Development and the civil service organization led Global Forum on Migration and Governance. She also serves on the coordinating committee of Tax and Fiscal Justice Asia, advocating for fair global tax systems benefiting vulnerable groups, including women and migrant workers. Everyone, let us welcome our fifth guest for this season, Miss Abigail May Guevara. Hello, Abigail.
Hello, Attorney Reg. Thank you for that very kind introduction, and also thanks for having us speak on this episode regarding the scam factories. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yes, and I understand you are from the Philippines, Abigail, right? And
Yes.
we're happy to be having guests from different countries in the ASEAN region, actually. So we're glad to have another Filipino with us this season, and we look forward to this very insightful conversation with you. Well, to start off, we want to understand this new form of crisis. So, can you give us an idea or a brief description of how how cyber scam compounds have emerged as a new form of human trafficking and forced labor in the ASEAN regions, particularly in its member states?
Thank you for that. I think this issue is very interesting. Number one is because if you watch news nowadays and if you read articles regarding online scamming, or we also refer this topic as the forced criminality, sadly, our own region, the Southeast Asia, has become the hub of all of these criminal
Mm.
activities happening. Southeast Asia, in fact, we face a lot of challenges posed by the organized crimes, particularly the trafficking in persons and the rise of the illicit economies. So I think just to also share, I've read in the recent Interpol report, I think it was published like for the first quarter of this year, victims coming from 66 countries have been trafficked and are currently in the online scam centers with no continent left untouched. So it's really surprising, frustrating, disappointing that we are on the headlines. But I think this issue started really as a regional crisis, but now it's a
Mm.
global threat. And also just to share, because I think it was year 2023 when our own organization conducted a regional meeting or a consultation also discussing this issue. Operations were already generating like 7.5 to 12.5 billion dollars. And today
Wow,
it
that's a
is
lot of money, and
that's
that's
really a
probably
lot.
yes, and that's like a big hub. I mean, yes. Please
Yeah.
continue.
Coming from, of course, hubs coming from like Laos, Thailand, Myanmar, and different countries within Southeast Asia. But I think today it has reached trillions. So if you're going to ask, I mean, all our audience, if you're interested to also know, the rapid escalation at some point has exposed how unprepared we are in Southeast Asia. From 2023, it was just billions. And now, 2025, 2 years after now, reach trillions. It exposed
Mm.
many of our own governments. We are we don't know how to respond to the so-called evolving and increasingly sophisticated nature of trafficking, because initially from the past what we know about trafficking is that one recruiter trafficking like one aspiring migrant worker, but this time it has the it has a factor wherein digital technology uh, play a very big role as well, and of course the rising AI use as well within our own region.
Well, can you walk us through that, Abigail? You've mentioned the digital aspect of it. So, can you give us an example of how this usually happens? And you've mentioned that it was 2 years ago, just billions, and but billions is still a lot of money and a lot of complex things involved. And now it has evolved to a trillion-dollar industry, and it's very disturbing because we're talking about cybercrime and cyber scams. So can you walk us through, maybe give us some examples of these things and how they are how people are being lured to certain things, like a promise of of a new job abroad, and then it would end up being trafficked in the countries that they're going to.
Yes, it is really important for us to understand how they are operating, how they are recruiting. But I think it is also important to emphasize that majority of the people deceived by fake Facebook postings or other, I mean, postings on different social media platforms, most of them, I would like to believe that they are not lured by aspiration. In fact, they are driven
Mm.
by desperation.
Mhm.
Because what do we have in the region right now? We have conflicts, we have high unemployment rate, we do have inflation so severe that our wages can no longer sustain a basic decent living. So I will walk you through, if I think 2023 was the height of this
Mhm.
cyber scamming or the forced criminality. So they post most of the time in Facebook, and then the initial contacts will happen or will be conducted through the use of WeChat, WhatsApp, Telegram.
Mm.
They
Mhm.
will ask, they will post like hiring of customer service, and then they will promise 1,000 to 1,500. And I think it's also important to know that, also important to understand that during the banning of pogos, they had a major strike. So some of the pogos, some of the former employees of the pogos, they
So,
were
wait, sorry, just
victimized.
to contextualize, pogos are offshore gaming, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
pogos here in the Philippines. Remember when we banned it, the government has no comprehensive plan on what
Mhm.
is going to be their work. So
Yeah.
of course, it's another vulnerability. And then they saw hiring posts in Facebook saying that you will have the opportunity to work in Cambodia, in Laos, in Thailand. And then they promised you to have a 1,000 to $1,500 salary per month. All you have to do is to, sign the contract, and they will encourage you to immediately start working, whether it's in Thailand, Laos, or in um, whether it's
Mm.
in Thailand, Laos, or Cambodia. And then once they already got your approval, the agent will immediately book your flight ticket, and then
Oh.
they will inform you that if you go through or pass through the immigration, all you have to do is to say that you are going as a tourist. And then we
Mm.
will process your work permit or the work visa permit once you arrived in the country of destination. And then once they arrived in the destination, they are trapped in a secured compounds with
Mhm.
are experiencing inhumane conditions, both working and living conditions. Like, for example, they are forced to work at least minimum of 20 hours per day.
Oh.
That bad. And then they have no access to their mobile phones.
Mhm.
They are being, I mean, they are given the copy of the scam scripts, like
Mhm.
what they have to tell the victim. And then they can also get incentives. Like, for example, if they refer a friend, they refer an
Mm.
acquaintance, a family member. If they're successful, they can possibly get $300 per person.
So you mean these people who are actually victims of trafficking also, I mean, they're sometimes their job is also to lure other people. So they do. That's why these things multiply exponentially because the victims themselves are forced to lure other victims.
Yes, but I think, of course, not with their own families or friends.
Mhm.
Because one condition, if you would like to escape, at least you need to find three replacement to
Oh,
replace.
there's a condition, usually a
Yeah,
condition for you to be able to be released.
yes. And then in some cases, they will ask you to pay 5,000 to 8,000 US dollars just for you to
That's a lot
escape.
of
That's
money.
that's a lot of money. And in both workplaces and in their own dormitories, their movements are tightly monitored. Even their toilet breaks must be brief and also monitored. And if you can see in the internet, if you search for example, a cyber scam hub, their compounds are surrounded by metal bars. They have a
Oh,
lot of armed security stationed in at the entry and exit points. So it's really impossible for you to escape. So I think
actually, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
so I think the it's a mental torture and emotional and mental torture for all the trafficking victims. All they want is to finish that 6 months contract and then hoping that they will still be alive by that time and be with their own families. But for that entire 6 months, they experience physical violence once quotas are not met, and in fact, they can experience sexual exploitations as well.
Oh, and that's very terrible. And you've actually walked us through the irregular pathways that they go through. And although, of course, we see that the trend is that they'll be coming as tourists first in a country, and then eventually, they will be led to a compound or a place wherein they are forced to work, and eventually do things that are against their will, and also being forced to do certain things just so they can escape. But at this point, thank you for highlighting the different migration and human rights violations that have been happening in this kind of scheme, in this kind of grand scheme. But I guess my next question is, since you've mentioned about the victims trying to escape or trying to get out of their situations, what then are the challenges to access to justice for these victims? I mean, we recognize that this is happening, but what do you think is the ASEAN region doing when it comes to giving access to justice to these victims? Can you give us some examples as well on how you're able to reach out to these people, considering that they are somehow incarcerated or secluded from everybody?
I think it's really the challenge how we can reach those trafficking victims. But there are ongoing debates as well within the region. In fact, some people are saying that we cannot consider these people as migrant workers. Therefore, we cannot provide the same support to them because they are trafficking victims. Therefore, for example, they will fall under a different category. But I
Mm,
think if you are going to also analyze, the walkthrough I just said a while ago, there are 11 indicators of forced labor are
Mhm.
all present. In
Mhm.
fact, the means, the act, and the purpose are all very clear.
Mhm.
Therefore, I mean, for us, there has to be a full cycle approach. One that addresses, of course, the chain of actors who are involved. Like, who are they? Are they big people? Are they conniving with government agencies? And the second one, the challenge of navigating, the challenge of defining who qualifies to be called a victims. So I
Mhm.
think, for example, one of the cross-border challenges that we are experiencing, if you are going to also analyze, most of the scam hubs are thriving at special economic zones. As we all know, special
Mhm.
economic zones, they have weak regulation and weak
Mhm.
oversight.
Mhm.
And most of the time, the law enforcement agency claim that they have a lack of jurisdiction, therefore they cannot intervene. Therefore, all these criminal activities can continue without, I mean, can
Mm.
continue unchecked. Second challenge is the fact that the organized crime group has strategically formed alliances with immigration officials, with
Mhm.
police officials, and other influential and powerful government officials, those who are facilitating the irregular movement of all of these trafficking victims. But I would like to highlight the third one, which is we currently lack uh, we currently lack we currently lack what do you call this one, victim identification,
Mhm.
because in the eyes of the country of origin they are trafficking victims. So
Mhm.
therefore we need to provide them with all the support, whether
Yeah.
healthcare, psychological counseling, shelter, while still in the country of destination. But the problem lies because the according to the countries of destination,
Mhm.
they are considered offenders, overstayers, and
Mm.
criminals.
Mhm.
So therefore,
Because
instead
because they went to the country illegally.
illegally, and also they are doing illegal activities.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the argument of the country of destination. That is why instead of them considering this as a potential case of trafficking, they just consider this as a simple labor dispute.
Oh.
Because yeah, so what is happening, for example, right after the rescue, immediately once released they will deport the trafficking victim, because in I'm not sure because I'm not a law student, they call it lack of material evidence to
Mm.
prove their trafficking path or the trafficking exercises or what they call the trafficking um, evidences during their journey going to the country of destination. Yeah.
But you see, Abigail, I actually appreciate that you've given us a very comprehensive view when it comes to this very complex issue. And we see that you've given us like the debate surrounding whether or not these victims should be classified as those who are victims of human trafficking. Are they also migrant workers? I mean, based on what they do. But also at the same time, we see how the receiving country or the country where they are being where they are lured to and where they are working sees a different view because indeed they are doing illegal activities and they came into the country in an illegal way. So we thank you for also sharing with us these different kinds of views because there are different angles or there are different perspectives when it comes to these things, and it is very important to be critical about it. And some people may argue it's for the other side, or others will view it on the other side as well. But it's good that you were able to walk us through the issues that are surrounding this very disturbing and at the same time alarming kind of human trafficking and human rights violations in the ASEAN region. Now, I will move now to what the regional action is and the accountability of member states in the ASEAN. We want to know, can you give us how ASEAN member states and partners can strengthen? Can you give us an idea how they can strengthen cross-border cooperation, migrant protection, and victim protection as well? And I guess if you also could share with us some of the accountability mechanisms that are probably in place at the moment to address this growing regional crisis.
Thank you. But before I proceed with the recommendations or what the ASEAN can possibly do to address this, I think, just to add, it this issue also exposed that
Mm-hmm.
our law enforcement agency within the region lack capacity to detect and to
Mm-hmm.
identify who are the trafficking victims and who are the potential trafficking victims who are forced to do all of these criminal activities. So I
Mm-hmm.
think indeed we were really unprepared when
Mm-hmm.
all of these things happened. But moving forward, I just want to I want to share that in the ASEAN or within the ASEAN, we already have the ASEAN Declaration on combating trafficking in persons,
Mm-hmm.
combating human trafficking in persons caused by the abuse of technology. It was
Mm-hmm.
adopted during the chairship of Indonesia. So, if I remember it correctly, it was 2023. And it was very clear in that declaration that we need to ensure that all trafficking victims must not be criminalized, they must not be
Mm-hmm.
detained.
Mm-hmm.
And just to also share, within the ASEAN, we already have the ASEAN Police. And then we also have a regular ASEAN ministerial meeting on transnational crime. So I think for sure they
Mm-hmm.
are talking about this issue and
Yeah.
how do we go about this issue. But if I can recommend
Mm-hmm.
some recommendations to the ASEAN member states, from the perspective of the civil society organization. I
Mm-hmm.
think number one, we need to revisit and to harmonize our own immigration laws and our
Mm-hmm.
own trafficking laws, because I think it's no longer responding to the
Mm-hmm.
evolving trends of trafficking. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe that was made in response to the nature of trafficking two
At
decades
that
ago.
time. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then I think it's important for the countries, especially those who ratified and signed the Vienna Convention. It is
Mm-hmm.
important for us to use that as a basis.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of good provisions and good recommendations in that convention as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that can be. But I think the most important thing for the ASEAN member states, this since this is a cross-border issue,
Mm-hmm.
we need to have a standardized victim identification. I
Mm.
don't think it will work if the Philippines has their own,
Yes.
Cambodia, they
Mm-hmm.
also have their own, or I mean, they will push for that, of course, because of sovereignty issues or or the importance of having having their own policies as well in place. And I think also for the ASEAN, it's important that we have this cross-border referral mechanism. For
Mm-hmm.
example, we get cases of online scamming cases from Cambodia, and the victim or the trafficking victim is a Filipino or a Filipina. Then I think it will work if we can have this cross-border referral mechanism. But at the same time, I want to emphasize that we cannot also push for that victim to stay
Mm-hmm.
longer in the country of destination.
Yeah.
I hope it is possible to to consider a video teleconferencing,
Mm.
while because I don't think they would want to wait for the court proceedings
Mhm.
to finish. It will take years to get
Yeah.
resolved. And yeah, I think just for me, the approach has to be a rights based, a victim
Mhm.
centered approach, and of course non punishment principle across all ASEAN member states. Yeah, those are the my initial thoughts.
Yeah, and thank you for your initial thought. You've walked us through your recommendations, and if only ASEAN member states could really look up into this issue, because it was nice that you mentioned it's now time to revisit and harmonize immigration laws, because other issues, technology has been a very big factor, and other issues have been emerging, and it has to be up to date, or at least relevant already with what's happening on the ground, or the reality of it all. So thank you for mentioning that. And you've also mentioned about standardizing victim identification among member ASEAN member states, as well as cross-border referral mechanism without forcing the victim to stay in the host country, and having, of course, a rights-based and a non-punishment principle when it comes to these kinds of victims. I mean, these situations. And I guess on that note, if there's anything that you would want to share with our viewers before we wrap up this episode, is there
And
hope?
I think there is hope only
Mhm,
if we will have this collective responsibility.
mhm,
But at the same time, for me, it will start by us not, not judging or not judging these victims directly or immediately without knowing the facts.
mhm,
And I think for me, it is really important for us to ensure that all regional frameworks will not further criminalize the victims.
mhm,
It should uphold, of course, the rights of the victims and restore their lost dignity.
mhm,
Because remember, when all of these things happened during the height of this issue, the first response was cross border restrictions. For the CSOs, what do we mean when we say cross border restrictions? What does it actually entail? Does that mean surveillance? And
mhm.
if so, then how can we manage in a way that it will protect the rights more than it violates them? So I think it starts with the right
Mhm,
mindset and,
mhm,
of course, a collective effort. For example, as MFA, since we're working with a lot of lawyers, so we have this cross-border collaboration and referral, and we try to, I we know fully that there are different jurisdiction, different legalities and complexities, but at least a little help by providing special power of attorney just for the case to push through,
mhm.
that we can help, and that we are helping those who are in need. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Abigail, for sharing with us your insights and even experiences when it comes to battling, or and experiences when it comes to facing these issues. And I'd like to note what you have mentioned, which is the collective responsibility, and having that approach where we see the victims as not violators, but also victims themselves because of the numerous human rights violations that have happened to them. And on that note, we want to say thank you to you for this very beautiful episode. Thank you so much for sharing with us what you have been doing for the past years, and how you and your organization and everyone else in the civil service society, civil service organizations, have also helped in addressing this very, very concerning issue. Before we end, would you want to promote your social media account, or any websites, organizations, any publications, or upcoming projects on your end?
Yeah, so I can promote our website. all you have to do is to search the Migrant Forum in Asia. You can see there our plans for the future engagement, for example, for the upcoming International Review on Migration, IMRF International Migration Review Forum, happening sometime, I think, May next year. And we have a monthly grassroots forum on migration and governance. So it's a CSO led. Those who are working on migration and those who are not working on migration but are interested to know more about the issues we are confronted with. And of course, I hope that many young individuals or the young generation will be interested in this kind of advocacy that we're doing. I think now more than ever, we really need to stand up for the rights of one another and to resist, to
Mhm.
reclaim and to realize the lost human rights concept that we know decades and years ago. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you so much for that. And Abigail, you have been giving us such wonderful points to reflect upon, and hopefully our viewers will be able to take on that after this episode. And so, again, join us again next time for another wonderful episode of ASEAN People Speak. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button on Spotify to stay updated and never miss an episode. You can also stay connected with us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube by following at WG ASEAN HRMEC. For more in depth information, you can also visit our website at aseanhrmec.org. Thank you so much, guys, for listening to me and to Abigail. We hope you had a wonderful time listening to her insights and you will be able to take home something with you today as you go along your beautiful day. Thank you so much, guys. And until next time, stay informed and stay engaged. Bye.